Scorsese's classic gave us a raw glimpse into the everyday world of the mob like never before. The film also launched several careers and has managed to endure.
In 1990, Goodfellas shocked audiences with its gritty depiction of New York gangster culture. The classic film is about Henry Hill, a gangster and member of New York City's Lucchese crime family. It also takes us on his crazy and wild adventures with Tommy DeVito and Jimmy Conway. But would you believe that the original cut was even more graphic than the final one? Nonetheless, the film needed to be adequately remastered following a botched test audience screening. Come along with us in this video as we decipher the much-talked-about scenes of Goodfellas that never reached our screens. Let us first familiarize and remind ourselves of the classic Goodfellas movie before we take a look at the scenes that were altered in order to achieve the final cut. The Goodfellas movie Goodfellas, which was released in 1990, met with positive reviews from moviegoers and critics both. It is widely considered Martin Scorsese's masterpiece. It is little wonder why, considering the extent of artistic genius and minutiae that went into the making of this magnum opus, which is most rightly associated with all of these. Like any great film, a lot of attention was devoted to making Goodfellas the perfect depiction of mob life. This is a film that, contrary to the majority of mob movies, does not try to illustrate the luxurious lifestyle of the mobs. Instead, it takes the viewer on a tour through the graphic violence, violent confrontations, and emotional interactions that occur deep inside the criminal justice system. The iconic film had performances by major Hollywood stars such as Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, Paul Sorvino, and Joe Pesci. However, the director's original vision was not exactly what was shown on screen. You see, maintaining the delicate balance between artistic expression and commercial response is an ongoing challenge that all directors face while working in the film industry. To make the film appealing to the general audience without sacrificing the integrity of the story, scenes had to be re-examined and certain plot points had to be changed. So what were these infamous scenes? Keep watching to find out. Henry Hill, the plot behind the iconic Goodfellas in 1995. Young Henry Hill is drawn to mob life in his Brooklyn neighborhood. He started working for Paulie Cicero and his crew, featuring Tommy DeVito and Jimmy Conway. Henry initially starts by selling stolen items for Jimmy before advancing to committing larger crimes. In the 1960s, the three of them began spending most nights at the Copacabana Club with women. Henry dates and marries Karen Friedman, a Jewish woman who wasn't happy about his life of crime, but later becomes enthralled with his flashy lifestyle, much to her parents' displeasure. In 1970, Billy Batts, a Gambino crime family member just released from prison, disrespects Tommy at a Henry-owned nightclub. Tommy and Jimmy brutally murder Billy. Fully aware that they might be retaliated against seriously, they choose to bury Billy's body in upstate New York. They had to relocate the rotting corpse 6 months later when they discovered the burial ground would be developed. In 1974, Karen threatens Henry's mistress, Janice, and forces Henry at gunpoint. Henry cohabits with Janice, but Paulie tells him that he needs to go back to Karen after he goes down to Tampa to get a debt from a gambler with Jimmy. When Henry and Jimmy return, they are arrested after being reported by the sister of the gambler, who is an FBI typist, and they are sentenced to a decade in prison. For the sake of supporting his family, Henry gets Karen to smuggle an illegal substance, which he trades with a Pittsburgh inmate. For years after that, Henry gets paroled and goes on to increase his cocaine operation with Tommy and Jimmy despite Paulie's prohibition. Jimmy assembles a crew and robs the Lufthansa vault at John F. Kennedy International Airport and makes off with $6 million worth of jewels and cash. After some of the members spend their money wastefully on lavish things in defiance of Jimmy's orders, and the getaway car was discovered by the police, Jimmy murders the majority of them, but spares Tommy and Henry. In 1979, Tommy is tricked into thinking that he has made it as a made man and is murdered after entering a room full of the ceremony, as revenge for murdering Batts. Henry is paranoid and addicted to dangerous substance by 1980. He arranges yet another drug sale with his Pittsburgh contacts, but gets arrested by agents and incarcerated. Karen bails him out and tells him that she flushed down the toilet $60,000 worth of cocaine in order to keep it from the FBI during a raid. now leaving them penniless and bankrupt. Having been betrayed by Henry, Paulie pays him $3,200 and disowns him. Henry then hangs out with Jimmy, who tries to get him to go on a hit, prompting Henry to become suspicious. Having caught wind that Jimmy was planning to have him eliminated, Henry turns stateside and becomes an informant. He is placed into the witness protection program with his family, testifies against Jimmy and Paulie, and relocates to a suburban neighborhood in order to complete the witness protection program. Henry laments his misery at leaving behind the life of a gangster to live a dull and mundane schnook. The cold awakening throughout the beginning of the movie Goodfellas. Viewers are immersed in the strife-torn world of the Mafia. The movie starts with Tommy DeVito, Joe Pesci, Jimmy Conway, Robert De Niro, and Henry Hill, Ray Liotta, cruising in the night, music heard in the background, and a strange thud also audible. In regard to this sound, the group of friends stop their car and remove the luggage from the trunk. The man is then shown being beaten up badly and seen to be dying in a scene that both shocked and amazed the viewers. Tommy grabs a knife and stabs the man 3 times, and then Jimmy shoots him repeatedly to ensure that he dies. This pre-opening credits opening scene gives Goodfellas the graphic and relentless violence that introduces the audiences to the various personalities of the 3 gangsters, their Tommy's inimitable cruelty, Henry's detached alertness, and the calm competence that punctuates the personality of Jimmy throughout the film. Nonetheless, the most unsettling aspect of this scene is the ultimate revelation that the man who had been murdered in the trunk of the car was no less than Billy Batts, portrayed by Frank Vincent. Billy Batts, a secondary villain of the film and Gambino crime family member, is a character whose life ends in tragedy, and what's more remarkable was the actual motive for why Billy was murdered as revealed. Later in the film, Henry, Jimmy, and Tommy had met Billy at a bar owned by Henry, where Billy had been celebrating his release from prison. But what began as a harmless social evening soon turned horrific when Billy took it upon himself to lecture Tommy about how he used to be a shoeshine boy before delving into the gangster lifestyle. The taunt was later capped off with Billy's classic line to Tommy, "Now go home and get your shoebox," the taunt that sealed his doom. But this was not quite how exactly this scene was originally supposed to happen, according to the original plan. The scene was originally scripted otherwise as seen by a test audience. Tommy would be required to stab Billy 7 times on screen. This was meant to specifically show the gory scenes often associated with the gangster lifestyle. But with the initial screening of the movie in front of a test audience, the reaction to this scene wasn't quite favorable. The scenes were so harshly painted that a few of the test audience members were reportedly walked out by this very first scene. You will concur with me that such a response would be quite worse for any film, let alone such an iconic piece of cinema as Goodfellas. This initial review made it back to the drawing board for director Martin Scorsese, as well as Nicholas Pileggi and Irwin Winkler, the film's producer, who sat down and thought about how they could cut down on the gore and violence without losing the integrity of the story, because achieving this fine balance was extremely crucial, because not only was the film meant to be a piece of art, but it also needed to be welcomed with open arms by the viewers. To battle this issue, it was agreed that compromise would be made and the scenes would be subtly altered to create more comfortable viewing without detracting from the message. Rather than 7 stabbings, it was edited down to 3 on-screen stabs with the remaining sounds of the rest in the viewer's imagination. This kept the intensity of the scene, but with only 3 shown. It also enabled the audience to connect with the storyline, producing an immersive experience as purposed. When Goodfellas was launched, this initial scene became timeless, gaining public approval for showing the violence of Mafia culture. It also set the audience up for what they were about to witness. It set the tone and the rhythm of the film, making the film real to the extent that gangster and Mafia films tend to be unrealistic. While this shift might not make any big difference, the truth is that every experienced director understands that minute details play a significant role. The circumstances of Spider's death, if you're a fan of Goodfellas, chances are Spider's death is your favorite scene. To many, this scene would remain etched in their memory. But did you realize this classic bloody scene almost didn't end up in the final cut? Goodfellas is one of the bloodiest films of its era, and many people consider it so. Its graphic imagery was staged in stark realism, more like a documentary than a conventional film. Because of its violent content, Warner Brothers originally asked Martin Scorsese to drop the key scene showing Spider's killing. Although the overall emphasis of the narrative was on Henry Hill's character, Scorsese chose to probe deeper into one of the crew's most volatile members, Tommy. Tommy was notorious for his horrible temper and outrageous impulsiveness, the two vices that killed him in the end. A key scene in the life of Tommy in Goodfellas was when he savagely killed Spider, played by Michael Imperioli. Although Spider played a small role in the movie, his role turned out to be one of the most memorable scenes in this classic film classic. Spider was pouring drinks for Tommy, Henry, and Jimmy during card playing in this particular scene. Spider, the bartender, however, failed to bring Tommy his drink. Considering this as an insult, Tommy immediately expressed his displeasure. The incident worsened as the rest of the crew burst out laughing, and Tommy had a fight with Spider. Tommy shot Spider in the foot, but the drama didn't stop there. Spider later came back with a cast on his foot and served them drinks once again. Tommy proceeded to tease Spider's injury, which further infuriated him. Spider, furious, insulted Tommy, which pleased Jimmy. This was when things turned mortal. The exchange set Tommy on fire, and he shot Spider several times, killing him. Warner Brothers was concerned with the brutal killing of Spider, as they feared that it would make Tommy an unlikable character and influence the audience's impression of the gangster. That was exactly the intention of the scene. The role of Spider was developed to present Tommy's coldness and brutality. This was not a glamorized depiction of being a gangster. It was intended to depict the terrifying truth of being Mafia. The scene did reflect Tommy's character correctly. He had explained that he was a complete psychopath. Thus, it was imperative that his character be shown exhibiting this quality on screen. In addition, the scene was required to describe subsequent events in the movie. Scorsese believed that removing Spider's death scene would change the way viewers perceived Tommy, as it was intended to capture his emotional personality. Although the studio was worried about the film being too graphic, Scorsese persisted, citing a number of reasons for retaining the scene. The studio feared that if they made the film too graphic, they would bypass a demographic of audience to make it watchable by only a niche group of individuals. This might seem like something good in the world of cinema. It is not, but veteran directors try to appeal to as many people as possible. Luckily, Scorsese was able to persuade Warner Brothers that Spider's death scene was crucial to the progression of the story. When Goodfellas eventually came out, the fears proved to be groundless. Audiences had no issues with Spider's gruesome demise, a massive relief. In the end, the scene added to the film's reputation as an unflinching portrayal of the brutal reality behind gang culture. Love it or loathe it, you can't help but admit that the